The qualification stage of the Call of Duty Mobile World Championships 2025 is finally over, and with that we know which 16 teams will be representing their region in Katowice. Leading up to the big day then in November, we're going to be diving deep into some of the matches that have happened along the way and talking about how much that's going to tell us about the team's performance in Katowice. This is Triggerfinger. For our first episode then, let's take a look at Europe. Now, Europe is a region that's been flagging over the last couple of years on the international stage. The last time that they made playoffs in the international competition was 2022, and over the last couple of years, in 2023 and 2024, the results for Europe have gotten significantly worse. That's led to now, this year in 2025, their spots being reduced down from 2 to 1. And that means that the pressure is on even more than ever for Europe to perform in this year's World Championships. But can they perform is the question. Well, to give you guys the answer to that question, we're going to be using our first deep dive of the season to take a look at a match that occurred during Stage 4 finals between Exclusive and Animus. Let's take a look at their Coastal Search and Destroy. We're going to be talking to you guys about how Exclusive and Animus played this map, whether they played it well, and how does the performance of European teams compare to some of the best teams in the world, like those in CDM in Search and Destroy. Without any further ado then, let's start chatting about Exclusive versus Animus here in Coastal Search and Destroy. Now again, I'm going to remind you guys, try to keep in mind that we're taking a look at these teams in context of what some of the best teams in the world, like those from China, might do in Coastal Search and Destroy, but also we kind of want to gauge where Europe is at. So almost immediately here, I'm going to take a pause and I'm going to go to the big minimap zoom to talk to you guys about the positioning that is pretty consistent throughout the first 6 rounds of Search and Destroy for Exclusive. Now obviously you guys can see this anyway, but just to give you guys a general idea here of what the player's positioning will be like, this setup is more or less the setup for Exclusive on defense. This doesn't change for the first 6 rounds of this Search and Destroy. Now, albeit the kind of the minor positioning inside each site might change, the general idea is you kind of have Champion Caesar covering the B zone, so you're going to have player number 2 and 3 pretty much here the entire time. You're going to have that sniper battle down the middle of the map from Veer here on defense, and then of course over by A, you're going to have Spy and you're going to have Neo. And the idea is, of course, you want a sniper around here, making sure you're watching A long. That's the entire point of this setup, and that's why you see more often than not Spy is going to be the player pushing in towards red. So that's the setup for Exclusive on defense, and it's worth saying that doesn't change throughout the entirety of this S&D. Okay, so let's kick off our analysis of Exclusive vs Animus here on Coastal Search and Destroy with a look at round number 1. Now, this entire round is predicated off of the opening snipe, and as an aside, by the way, just going to show you this little position from Says. People try to gaslight me that this is something that people have seen before. I can tell you that I've casting COD Mobile professionally for the last couple of years, watch partying like the last 7 to 8 weeks of CDM. I have never seen this snipe being used, and that's why it shocked Tan and I so much when Says takes Veer out of the play. But to kind of, again, talk about why this is so important, we'll go big minimap and talk to you about the positioning of a player like Veer here on the defense and why taking him out of the play is as important as it is. So Veer with this back snipe positioning is something that, again, Exclusive do a lot of here on the defense. It's not something that changes through this Search and Destroy. Mid-map control is everything for Animus, and Veer with this one line of sight kind of shuts that entire thing down. So there are so many different kind of entry points towards B and A that get completely shut down when you've got a sniper like Veer or any other sniper for any team in Call of Duty Mobile watching it. Obviously, you can't get here, you can't get towards the ramp, and really, you can kind of get to these positions, but not without Veer at the very least seeing you do it. But more to the point, if, say, an attack on towards one of these sites, if A or B fails, let's say you try to push down A long and there's a sniper watching you from here and you just can't get to the site, well, in doing so, in trying to rotate back, maybe you feel like, hey, we're going to make the comm, let's rotate all the way around towards B. That's a terrible arrow, but still, if that's the route you take, again, the problem is that in doing so, Veer is going to see you doing that. And that's why taking a sniper out of position in the middle of the map is so important, because it gives you so many different ways to play the round. So, with that in mind then, that's why getting this kill for Says is so integral. And Says really does open up the round by taking Veer out of this play. So first opening snipe, comes through for a Says. Now, the defensive reaction here is, I would say, relatively unique for Exclusive, or at the very least in kind of the commitment that they make to said defensive play. Now, sometimes what you'll see teams do on the defense here, and I'm going to represent this with blue arrows, is you'll see them kind of take a little bit of pressure off of the A site with an opening snipe. They'll send a player down low in towards this area of the map. Obviously, very difficult for you to see that with the two-tier design of Coastal Search and Destroy, and keep an eye on mid through this sort of ramp area. Now, that prevents anybody from pushing too far up the map. It basically blocks this entire lane off, so no flanking plays can happen. And as far as bar is concerned, even though you can't see all the way through, a player on the B-bomb site can deal with that. But that's generally speaking the reposition that you see, with the other player on A kind of retreating towards this back stairwell area and keeping an eye on both the push through a mid-cut and through a long, and again, they can also back out of the bomb site if they need to. That's a pretty standard setup for kind of losing a sniper in the middle of the map on defense in Search and Destroy, but that's not what Exclusive do here. Instead, their reaction is to send both Champy and Caesar straight in towards the mid-cut, and they also push Neil up here in towards mid-cut as well. The idea being that they're anticipating some kind of push straight through the middle of the map with that, and they need to make sure they react to it fast. Unfortunately, that is a misread from Exclusive. Now, the big issue is with a rotation like that is you do a couple of things. Now, the most dangerous thing they probably do here in this double commit in towards the bar area, straight towards the middle of the map, is they leave the entirety of the B push open. And they're very fortunate in a way that that's not a play that Animus makes, because that would have been a huge error. Obviously, that's just the gamble you make with trying to plug up the middle of the map. But the bigger issue here for Animus, or for Exclusive, excuse me, on the defense, is that they leave the entirety of the back stairwell and the A lane open, with Spy being in the position that he's in, being a little bit more kind of defensive over the A-bomb site as opposed to actually the A-long. Because the biggest issue with Spy's positioning here is that he can really only see everything past this wall to the left of this kind of line of sight. He can't see this back stair area. He has no idea that if somebody from Animus was to, say, make a push in behind the stairwell or down low on these stairs, he would have no idea that's what's happened because he's not looking in that area. And in making that little kind of error, I want to say, in positioning, he allows players through from Animus, and you're going to see that's how this round falls apart. So they all reposition towards the middle of the map here, and Shark decides, all right, cool, I'm going to push under. It's a perfect play call from Animus, because now they've got a kind of perfect route to make here through to the defensive side. Shark gets through, we're just going to go past the replay here. Shark gets through, and you can see on the minimap, these guys have absolutely no idea that a player has gone through, and that's where this round falls apart, is that Shark manages to get both of these kills behind enemy lines because of the fact that the lane is open. And you can see him get both of the kills. Now, this is actually a bit janky, him finding these kills, but gets one kill against Champy, Caesar there, and even if Shark dies in this situation, more likely than not, Sao is now going to be able to pick up that gunfight. And at this point, it's too late, right? This round is kind of already over. There is maybe a chance for the remaining players of Exclusive to catch this rotation through, but the one players that did stay behind, or the couple of players, I should say, that did stay behind, the call has already remained. Like, the B-bomb site is totally clear. You guys can make a wrap through spawn, and you will get through without any issues, and that is exactly what happens here. So if we, again, go big picture, we can go through the remainder of the round. You can see they get B-site control, and at this point, even though Neil and Spy could theoretically try and 2 versus 4 this, it is just overwhelming. Spy gets into the site, does actually manage to try and catch a player. Neil snipes off one, but the trade's just too strong. It's highly unlikely that you're going to win a 2 versus 4 in that round, and just that one little kind of gap in the gameplay where they leave a lane open gives Animus their first round in S&D. Okay, so straight into round number 2 then, you can already see some of the adaptations that Exclusive are making on the defense of what happened in round number 1. So this round, instead of Neil being more positioned closely towards the middle of the map, they realize that, hey, we need to cover up this A-long lane. So Neil has pushed up towards this close corner to try and keep an eye on the immediate push through towards A. And that's a really important position to make, because right off the bat here, Neil picks up an opening snipe. Now, it's worth saying that this snipe does get traded, but it's the fact that Neil finds this opening snipe and gets the information that, hey, it's an immediate push in towards A. Neil can't find any more, but him just blocking off that one lane is so important for Exclusive. It is such a good adaptation to make off of what happened in round number 1. Now, a little bit later into this round, as well as we move forward here, you can automatically see also a small adaptation that is made from Veer. Now, Veer isn't going to lose the fight in the middle of the map. As a matter of fact, he doesn't have a fight to contend with this time around. But this time, he's playing a little bit more reserved here towards the back of the map. And the reason for that is, if Spy is going to play watching this angle again, they need to make sure that this wrap is being watched. So he now has a lot more of a reserve position. He can keep an eye on the ramp push through. Obviously, also has an eye out for if any of those flanking plays are being made. But this position is a lot better from Veer. It's a good adaptation to make. You can tell that they're now being a lot more careful about Animus pushing through that one lane. Alright, so moving a little bit later then into the round, and Animus have decided that they didn't get enough information over by A to actually make that push, so they're going to wrap around towards B instead. Now, fortunately for them, Veer doesn't actually see this wrap because he's moved away from the map and has chosen instead to get in towards Bar. So they are kind of here, and Exclusive don't necessarily know about it. What they do have, though, is they have that setup that they had back in round number 1, where back in round number 1, they couldn't really fully pull it off because they had to cover for Veer dying in the middle of the map, which is to have a couple of players on the other side of this wall watching this entry in towards B. And you think in a 3 versus 2, this should be a pretty easy thing for Animus to pull off as long as they hit this as a team and not one by one. Says will choose to go into the site with a sniper rifle and try and take one of the players out, go for a quick check on the corner. Unfortunately, he doesn't expect the double stack through from Exclusive, and that double stack immediately removes him from the play. He does ping Caesar down to a very weak amount of HP, and there is a bit of a delayed follow-up coming through from Gifilla and Sao that will take both Champi and Caesar out of the play. Now, in this moment, if you're the last remaining players here on this push in towards B, you have full site control, and Veer is really your only immediate problem. Now, Veer actually kind of loses his opening snipe. He doesn't hit the snipe. He whiffs it against Sao. You can actually see that bullet trailing right past him. And Sao will make Veer weak in this play. And this is where this round kind of falls apart for Animus. You have numbers. You can get in towards B site. You're perfectly fine. Sao, though, does not need this kill. And this is, I think, maybe one of the downsides of a player that is kind of a young gun, very snappy, can absolutely hit their shots more often than not, and has a lot of talent, is that there isn't really a lot of trigger discipline sometimes. And this is one of those situations where that is lacking. So he'll immediately go and chase this kill. Veer is already repositioned and snipes him out of the play. And now that will leave one player isolated on the site for an immediate reaction coming through from those players on Exclusive. Now, Shark is out of the play, isn't in the site just yet. Gifilla is the only one here. Of course, the comm has already been made, and it's a very easy 2 versus 1 for Spy and Veer to take. And then, of course, now if you're Shark, you're out of the site. You've got to try and find a way back through. You've already shot, so they know more or less where you are. And so Shark is forced to try and push into the site by the fact that Veer jumps on the defuse, and that's the round done. Some extra bullets in the body as well there for Spy. But that little play there from Sao, if we go back, if Sao doesn't make this play, if he doesn't push in for Veer and just decides to go back to the back of the site instead, again, if this is not what he does, if he goes to the back of the site and they hold this and then a late flank comes through from Shark, all that they really need to do is wait for Shark to come in on the late flank, and they probably win this round. But him leaving Gifilla isolated in this round is what loses them round number 2. Hey guys, Future Infinity here, talking to Past Infinity and calling him a massive idiot. I'm just jumping into the video real quick to say sorry about the electrical interference that seems to have occurred on my mic for basically the remainder of the video. I recorded like 40 minutes worth of footage and had zero idea that there was any interference on my mic whatsoever. Future Infinity has figured out what said interference was, but obviously Past Infinity had no idea what the hell was happening. So I can only apologize for the electrical interference on the mic that remains in the remainder of this video. But there's some good stuff, so please stick around. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Bye. Okay, so as we get into round number 3 then, things become a little bit more simplistic. This round kind of goes one way due to simple overchalling, a lot of individual plays from players across the board. And that even starts off the round with one here. You're seeing it almost immediately. Spy gets over-aggressive and tries to take out Narcs in the middle of the map. Narcs is watching that POV and almost immediately gives the man advantage to Animus here in this round. However, I really love this play from Veer at the start. It's not like a cataclysmic thing for Animus, but it does change the pace of the round off the back of a map. man advantage. So you're seeing here already that Veer is in a position that normally he wouldn't be in. Obviously, regularly, he kind of covers this area of the map, watching the middle of the map. Instead, the fact that Neil is now down means that they have less of a presence over the A site. So Veer has made a wrap through all the way through towards the back stairs, and he's already gotten towards watching A long, but he's not happy with this position. It's a pretty predictable position for anybody on the other side, and it would be pretty easy for somebody on Animus to outsnipe him. So instead, Veer moves to a position that's relatively unconventional. He's going to sit in this stairwell and use that stair heady to catch a player off guard. So we'll show you that here as it plays out. Veer gets to that position, and now Animus have to push this. This is something that Shark isn't necessarily going to expect, and because of that, as soon as Shark turns the corner, Veer has him dead to your right. Again, just not something that Shark is going to expect. And now if we pause again here, we're kind of in a situation where for Animus, the A push is now not really an option for you. You're starting to panic. You had a man advantage, and now that's falling away from you. So what they're going to do instead is make that wraparound once again. The one piece of information they do have in this round is that the Veer, at the very least at the moment, isn't here. He's not watching the middle of the map, and that's going to leave a lane open from their perspective. So it's going to be a moment before Veer gets back to that position. From their POV, they can make that wrap that we were talking about, either through the spawn or even perhaps through the middle of the map. Either way, a rotation to B is now on the cards, and that is exactly what happens here. So if we fast forward real quick, positioning doesn't change, but here is that wrap, and again, no Veer in the middle of the map means that they can definitively get away with this. So into B we go. And another thing I'm going to note here as we go big mini-map is to show you guys a bit of an adaptation from Exclusive. So obviously Champion Caesar previously had kind of hugged the close wall and they were watching the entry. Well, no, that's not what's happening this time. This time Champion Caesar have altered their position ever so slightly, choosing to play kind of around this back barrels area. There's a lot of coverage here, but a little bit more reserved in towards the site, crucially with a trophy system on the bomb site itself to stop any incoming utility revealing their position. And that's integral as we go into the round itself here, because on the push, again, it's the same kind of situation. Animus, they've got numbers. As a matter of fact, technically speaking, they've got a 4 versus 2. The utility goes in and the trophy catches one of them. The other one, it goes a little bit wide. The trophy stays, but you don't gain really any information on that apart from where players are not positioned. You kind of know, hey, they're not close, they're not passed to the right. You clear a little bit of space, but you don't know exactly where the players for Exclusive are inside the site. You don't get any information off the back of that. So all of this is being used. Smoke is now going to get laid down here towards the back of the site to cover any potential transition that a sniper might have made already towards the back. Obviously, you've got to remember that Says, technically speaking, hasn't been able to watch that just yet. But this round is still not that great from Animus. So Animus actually kind of solo chow in this moment. You can see this here. So they've got a 3 versus 2. Gefilla, he goes in first, gets shut down. Almost immediately shut down. Next up, Narks, shut down. And then Sawo challenges, and he does find one that gets traded. And while all that goes down, you might have realized there was another player still alive in the moment. Says you can see him in the middle of the map here. He gets turned on. We don't actually see it from his POV, but he gets turned on by Neil at the same time. So that is a round that just falls apart. It's a good idea. They clearing out site well. That round just totally falls apart because of solo challenge from players on Animus and a 3v2. Okay, so round number 4, this is actually a very good round from Animus, and probably their best round in the entirety of the Search and Destroy. We're going to go big map, mini-map here to show you guys exactly what happens, and we're going to press play on the mini-map as it happens as well. So, you can see here off the start of this round, almost immediately, that we want to see a fast push coming out from Animus, and that's what they want as well. They want to get some pace in this Search and Destroy. Currently, they don't really have any. So the idea is, it's just going to be a straight push down long on towards A. The issue is on the defense is that Exclusive have actually made a good play of them for themselves to counter a play, even if they don't exactly realize or have that information. That's what Animus want to do off the start of this round. They're going to double stack A long with Spy and Neil, and they're going to sit in a position that Neil's used before, which is to keep an eye on that kind of cross. Now, Neil's used this position before, obviously Spy hasn't, but it is something that Animus are going to have to check. And so what they're going to do is they're going to throw some utility over to check if that position is currently being used by Neil. Now, no trophies utilized in this moment, so a nade goes over the top, and it tags not one, but 2 of those players. So that is information for Animus to work with here in this moment. Now, off the back of that information, you've thrown a nade through and you almost immediately recognize, hey, I've got a tag. It is an immediate follow-up of another nade, this time, I believe, thrown by Says towards the back, and it takes both players out. You take a 2-for-1, and that is just really good util play coming out of Animus off the start of this round. Okay, and as we get a little deeper into this round then, off the back of that nade, Exclusive's reaction to this is actually pretty good. They almost immediately try to kind of take some space here if we show you guys what they do. Obviously, again, a lot of their adaptations on the defense seem to come from repositioning Champion Caesar around B. Their reaction is just to basically fast Chal out of B and catch them on the cross. And you got to remember as well, if we kind of go back on the minimap here, you can see that Via probably sees this. Like, Veer makes this comm. You can see him, like, in the middle of the map here. Remember, he's the one, again, with the sniper rifle. He can see down this lane over the fountain. Like, he has a full line of sight. So he sees this rotation on the minimap. He makes the call to Champion Caesar, and they almost immediately follow. What they don't anticipate, though, is that somebody from Animus is already pretty far pushed up. That player, of course, being Sao, it's not something that Champion Caesar are going to necessarily immediately expect, and it's not something that they check. So as soon as Champy and Caesar push up off the back of this play, they get caught out both by Says on the rewrap and by Sour in the corner. That leaves Veer isolated in the middle of the map, and he gets shut down pretty easily as well with the snipe. Probably doesn't help in that situation. But all in all, that is a pretty flawless round from Animus there. Really well played on the util off the start, and then the follow-up as well, albeit be a good response from Exclusive. They responded just as well. Okay, so in towards round number 5 then, Animus have bounced back just a little bit. This round is, again, one of those rounds that things kind of fall down a little bit later. So there's the opening snipes right off the rip. Teams trade, and you go almost immediately down to a 4 versus 4. Crucially, though, once again, Animus have cleared Veer out of the middle of the map, and so this entire lane, which would normally be covered by Exclusive, is now not. And as you're about to find out, if we kind of fast forward here a little bit further into the S&D, you're going to see Animus make the push in straight towards B. Now, this time, you're going to have the exact same situation as before, where Animus are going to be in a 3 versus 2 against Champy and Caesar around the back of the A site. You can see them in the exact same position before towards the back. But this time, things are not as individual on the push. So if we fast forward to that immediate push, this time Animus actually chow at the same time. They actually put a lot of team shots through, and that is what wins them this fight. So Champa gets caught with a nade, does actually walk over the kill against Shark, but then the double chow comes through from Says and Sao. Good team shot, and they are going to overwhelm those players at the back of the site. So for the first time now, Animus, they have control. They do well on the offense. However, they do not win this round. Exclusive do slowly puncture a way into the site, I should say. So Spy opens things up by picking one off around the site. Just kind of walks in, eventually finds one. You see, there it is. Kafila with a reach out, and Spy picks up that kill. And now you kind of have a couple of different directions to look here if you're last remaining players on site. So, you kind of have to keep an eye on this side of the site, and you have to keep some kind of eye on this side of the site. That's the 2 points of entry here. And so if you're kind of Animus in this situation, you need to have one player looking at each side of the site. And generally speaking, with the setup you currently have, the idea is I think that you're going to have Says keep an eye on kind of the offensive side entry, and you're probably going to have Sao keeping an eye on the defensive side re-entry. That should be the idea for Animus here on the setup. That, though, does not happen. This is another good example of Sao, I think, despite being a shooter, kind of giving up a lane. So you can see Sao just keeps back and forth flicking between the lanes, and he looks away at the wrong time. COD timing befalls him, and Spy will go almost immediately into the site at the same time as his teammate does, and then Sao gets overwhelmed as after Says. So it feels like just a little bit of COD timing obviously doesn't go Sao's way, but because Sao feels like he needs to constantly flick back and forth and isn't watching a lane, one is left open for an Exclusive player to walk straight onto the site, and all of a sudden it's a 2 versus 3 for Exclusive. Alright, this is a pretty quick round then for the final offensive effort for Animus before they switch sides. We're going to go back here a little bit to the start of the round, and mini-map zoom in for you guys to show you the idea on this initial attack. So this is one of the faster rounds that Animus do manage to pull off here. It's an immediate util send straight towards A. And to be fair, Exclusive actually do match that pace by also kind of full hitting this one lane. Unfortunately, a couple of players do get caught by those nades, and then Animus are fast enough to react off the back of it. So you're going to see that here. Almost immediately, Champy kind of falls foul to a couple of nades sent over the top. He gets shut down. Double chow from Animus in towards the mid cart, and that is a full clearance over A. Now, the next thing to note in this round is that Animus are actually pretty fast to get the bomb down. They're pretty quick about it. They want to make sure that they have an advantage in a 3 versus 2, and they might as well kind of add another bit of stress to Exclusive in this round with the timer. Now, Veer makes an interesting play here. You know, he's pretty quick himself to react. So if we go back just a little bit, of course, he's in his normal position. If we bring up the marker, he's in his normal position, right? He's trying to keep an eye on the minimap. That's where Veer generally is here as player number 4. He's going to make a wrap through under and go all the way through towards A long. And his idea here with the play is if, well, all the pressure is coming from the mid to A cut all through here, then he doesn't need it to worry that much. He could probably make this play without getting caught. And you're going to see what happens here, because there is one player who is not in the play, and that is player number 1 in Says. Says is going to make a wrap all the way through A long just to try and clear that space, just in case somebody is there. And unfortunately for Veer, he gets a little bit of bad COD timing. There's no real reason to expect a player to be here, especially when this aggressive of a push is happening. And so he just kind of gets caught with his pants down. And let's show that rotation to you guys over here. So you can see, again, Veer makes the wrap through. Says from the spawn catches him off guard. And to be fair, Veer does actually check this as well. He just gets some horrific timing, turns around, and then, of course, gets shut out. Eventually sniped from down long. Veer not long for this world. And then, of course, it's just down for Caesar in a 1 versus 3. Now, what I'll say about Caesar here in this 1 versus 3, this is kind of a European tendency to wide peak on a retake. What you'll see in, like, CDM, for example, again, we kind of compare in Europe to the highest level of play in CODM SND, is you'll see sort of, like, slower shouldering for kind of information before wide challenge. Caesar is slow, at least initially, but off the back of this retake, just immediately wide peaks it. No hesitation whatsoever, just straight into a 1 versus 2 with no information as to where those players are, and immediately get shut down. So, good bit util at the start of that round from Animus. Veer doesn't get unlucky. Maybe that round plays out different, but good reposition from Says, make sure that Veer isn't able to do anything, and Animus go into the half at least, tied up with Exclusive. Okay, so now we're switching sides, and Exclusive are now playing on the offense. And just as we talked about Exclusive's defense, we should take a moment to talk about Animus's defense. And I would argue this is even more important because their defensive setup is inarguably why they lose this search and destroy. So let's immediately kind of take a pause here and go big on the minimap to talk about kind of the defensive setup. Now, there's nothing particularly special about this setup. It is pretty much exactly the same as Exclusive. This is a standard setup for Coastal Search and Destroy, and it's pretty much just a standard setup for Search and Destroy in general. On the defense, you're going to have a couple of players located around B, albeit again, just as with Exclusive, these positions will change consistently throughout the rounds. You're going to have a sniper positioned in the middle of the map. That Says, albeit he's kind of currently sitting to the right of a player at the middle of the map. He chills around mid-map and make sure he watches that lane. And then, of course, you've got a couple of players in player number 3 and player number 4. That's Narks and Gefilla over by the A site. So this is a pretty standard setup, and whether or not these players shift ever so slightly, this is the setup that Animus use pretty much every single time. And it is a setup that Exclusive play around almost every single time as well. Okay, so the way this round kind of plays out is more or less the same way that you would see Animus on the offense kind of puncture a hole in the defense of Exclusive. It is this opening snipe. So once again, this time it Says that gets sniped out. And just like when it was Veer on the other side, this is going to leave this entire defensive side open now for players to push through. And it actually does affect the defense, although not as heavily. Animus, unlike maybe Exclusive on the defense, don't kind of full stack in towards bar. As a matter of fact, it is just going to be Shark turning around to keep an eye on that one lane. But this is important because it weakens things up on the push here for Exclusive in towards site. All of this now is going to be on Sao. Now, important to note is what Sao is using in this situation. He is going to be using a HSO, and that thing has hella range. So Sao, theoretically, could be fine in this situation. He just needs to keep an eye on all of these players coming through with the HSO. Just keep on watching that one line of sight. It sounds difficult to do, but with an HSO, trust me, you can absolutely shred through everyone. So later in the round then, Exclusive do have this 4 versus 2 over by B. Sao, of course, watching the entry point, and there's going to be Shark towards the back of the site. Now, Shark, again, because of the fact that there's no mid-map coverage, has to keep an eye on the backside, has to keep an eye on the bar push. This is all really on Sao, keeping an eye on this entry, and he simply gets overwhelmed. So just on that initial right, Sao is going to find Champy, but he's put so many shots in towards Sao that he has to back up. If he goes down and leaves Shark all on his lonesome, it's done anyway. But the act of doing that, if we go to the minimap here, I mean, again, you don't really need the minimap to see this, but just look at the positioning that he gives up in doing this. And to be fair, it's the right play from Sao. It's also equally, though, the right play from Exclusive to do this. So just look at the kind of lane that opens up here for the offense for them now to get in through this side. Also, of course, you do have Neil making sure nobody catches the Exclusive players on the wrap. But basically, it means that this one line of sight that Sao was watching previously is now no longer the case. Exclusive can run right past and overwhelm Shark on the flank. And again, just to show you guys that here in the minimap, opening gunfight goes down, Sao push back, and now you're already starting to see that one in Spy has already gotten past, and all of a sudden now with Sao weak, it just becomes a 3 versus 2 on the site, where it's very, very easy for those Animus players to get overwhelmed, and that is exactly what happens. And off the back of that, you have one player that's chilling off-site. Neil is just making sure that no players wrap through. It's an easy kill for him to try and close out the round. Narks tries to get through on the flank, and he gets shut down as well. Just a really good play on the entry there from Exclusive. Just way too easy for them to get past out of the shotgun. Okay, so into the next round, Animus do change their defensive setup ever so slightly. If we pause, I'll show you guys what that change actually currently is. So Sao is now on a PKM, and he's chilling a little bit further reserved, trying to watch the close push in towards the site. At the same time, you also have Shark still here, but also playing a little bit more reserved towards the backline. The idea being here for Animus is that if Exclusive are going to play aggressive, well, just keep an eye on the lines of sight and let them into the site. But don't actually let them plant the bomb. Just try and play trades in a very different position than you were last time around. Just playing reserve to counter aggression from Animus. It is good in theory. Unfortunately, though, I mean, just right off the rip here, you can see just kind of how awry this actually goes. So once again, Exclusive, they're very quick with it. They overwhelm Sao towards the backline, who takes one down, but almost immediately gets traded off the back of finding that first kill. So here it is. Yeah, Sao picks up one, and then they just overchow everything. Now, at this point in time, Shark is still alive towards the back of the site. And to be fair to Shark, he actually does occupy and play his life really well here in this situation. So if you look at kind of what the players here for Animus on the defense, you need to get those players through on towards from A to help out. Like, you need those reinforcements, you need this wrap to happen pretty damn quickly. And so Shark towards the back of the site, his entire job at this point, you've lost Sao in the play, is to just try and play as annoying as possible, play your life for as long as possible, so that this 1 versus 2 can become a 3 versus 2 in your favor. However, once again, in theory, it's great. The execution is just lacking, because while Shark might well play his life for long enough that those players do get over here, they never actually get into the site itself. They're unable to actually add any value. And you might have already noticed it looking over by the minimap as well, but those players, their lives get even worse, because while they're making that play, there's one player who's being a nuisance, and this is the first time you're going to see this play being made, but it's not the last time you're going to see this route being taken. If you saw Shark make this kind of play previously, well, you're now going to see Neil make this kind of wraparound through a long, all the way through the defensive spawn. And so these players that couldn't really get in towards this bottleneck, didn't really want to get too aggressive, are going to get caught with their pounce down Fry players, Fry Neil specifically coming off of the spawn. And we'll see that play out here. So again, those players, they get towards the back of the site. They do get to Shark, but they just get to him a little bit too late. Shark doesn't get the help that he needs in that situation. Of course, Neil also comes from behind to ruin it, and well, then it becomes Gifilla left up in towards the site in a 1 versus 3. He's got absolutely nowhere to go in this situation. He can get aggressive and take the players down on the site, but he also knows that Neil is coming behind, so he kind of just panics and gets into the 1 versus 3. Now, to be fair, he cheats steal out the round, but does also get caught on the exit by Via. So really good round once again from Exclusive. Animus, they adapted well. It's just the execution of those adaptations could have been better. Okay, so going into round number 9, this is Animus's only defensive win of the entire game. And even this, I'll be honest, kind of comes from Exclusive messing up. So we'll go big minimap and talk about exactly how they mess up. So right off the rip here, you're going to see something that, to be fair, teams rarely ever do. I think literally every single nade Exclusive has, almost immediately gets sent towards the back stairwell to try and clear out any sniper presence from a long. It's also worth saying, to be fair, that there is another player here on the defense. If I just use the yellow marker to show you guys the positioning on the defense, you can see there's 2 sniper positions from Animus, or at the very least just two players that are watching that A long. Now the second player, the one that's closer to the offensive spawn, Animus don't necessarily know about. So their idea at this point is just to kind of yeet util over the top, clear out that back stairwell space, and just completely fast hit the A site. And to be fair, that works right off the rip here. So you can see that util goes all the way through, and Narcs is completely eviscerated in the round. You are not surviving 5 nades. That is going to overwhelm any trophy system. So we're going to take a pause there. So you get the first blood if you're Exclusive in this round. Now, this is something, again, I'm going to remind you guys, if we're comparing European CODM S&D to kind of Chinese S&D, this is another good example of how a Chinese team probably wouldn't allow this to happen. So look at the route here that Says takes. So we already talked about him being pushed up towards the stairwell. Now, he probably could have stayed here and got more kills. He probably could have maybe taken a 2-for-1 and made the round a little bit easier, but still, he probably would have left them at disadvantage because Exclusive probably would have still ended up with more map control, and it would have been less defensive presence over by A, which is a big issue for Animus at this point in time, given the fact they've just lost back stairwell. Instead, what they do, what Says does in particular, is he goes for a wrap all the way through towards the back stairs. And that's important because this is a position, as far as Exclusive are concerned in the moment, that they have already cleared. They don't expect anybody transitioning from B to get to that point in time. Like, you're not making that cross that quickly. As long as they hit it fast enough, they think they don't have anything to worry about towards that back stairwell. And that little re-wrap from Says completely blows things up. So you can see that here. The re-wrap, they don't check towards the back line. The double stuns go a little bit short, and then Says takes 3 down. Gafilla also takes a trade on the site, but Says pieces them up, finds 3, and again, it's solely because of the fact that Exclusive already think at that moment they have already checked the backside. They have no reason to do anything else. And at this point in the round, it's now down to Fear in a 1 versus 3. And this is, once again, a situation that we've talked about previously with players where they're in a kind of 1 versus X situation where you start to think, all right, well, are you going to shoulder? Are you going to overchal? And I think there's a European tendency, again, if we're comparing these European players to maybe what you'd see in CDM, to lean more towards overchalling than actually peaking. Now, in this instance, Veer is going to get 1 for 3, and that's ironically down to an overchal coming out from Sawo here. If we move forward, Veer kind of tries to meticulously clear lots of angles. We're just going to fast forward through this 1 versus 3. And finally goes to peek the site. Checks it. Sawo gives him a freebie. It's a really weird little challenge out from Sawo here as soon as Veer reveals himself out into the open. Easy snipe there for Veer. And, well, Veer's just not going to get any more here with 15 seconds left. Time starts to become an issue. And at this point, Animus are just going to throw shoulders, get no position. Veer tries his best to 1 versus 3, but that is just not going to happen. So we get Sawo down to a freebie, and to be fair, that's not a horrible attempt at a 1 versus 3 for Veer, but just too slow and isn't going to win the 1 versus 3. But overall, a really good round from Animus and a great play from Says makes them win that round. It's their only defensive round win the entire sea of this S&D. Okay, so in towards the penultimate round of this Search and Destroy then, Exclusive, they've tried A, and it didn't really work for them, even though it was kind of down to maybe them messing up and not necessarily anything particularly ingenious on Animus' side. So they do go straight back towards B. Now, once again, Animus have changed their setup here, albeit it's the same kind of players around the same kind of positioning. This time around, it's both, again, Sawo and Shark, albeit Sawo is now sitting towards the bar, keeping an eye on the cross from bar, and you've got Shark backing him up, can also keep an eye on mid alongside Says. Now, I'm going to take this moment to say here that this B defensive setup from Animus is pretty poor, and what teams in CDM would generally speaking do. So teams in CDM would have a player like Sawo, who you got to remember played with an HSO at the start of this defensive half for Animus, would play a lot closer towards the cut with the HSO, with the help of some trophy systems around to prevent any incoming util. But the idea is you keep an HSO pre-aimed out that cut, no one's getting through. Another thing that teams do very well here on this map in CDM is they'll have a player with a sniper rifle towards the back, keeping an eye on that cross again. The idea being nobody gets through here, ain't nobody getting through, of course. And, you know, you don't need a sniper in the middle of the map, generally speaking. You can have like ARs or SMGs watching the cross through, because you'll want a sniper over here on defense. But certainly around the B site, I think just keeping an eye on this open angle with the HSO and the Tundra is a really smart thing to do. And at no point in this search and destroy do either of the teams perform a setup anywhere near as kind of good as that. And I think that's something where European teams could absolutely learn from CDM teams, is just positioning around key power weapons. HSO and Tundra are the two most powerful weapons right now in CODM, and you need to be using them more effectively. And it even gets to the point, right, if we go big picture here while we've got this moment, where Sawo has only pulled out the HSO once. Like every other round, he's either had a PKM out, or he's had, a VMP or a USS-9, like an SMG. Like, he's pulled off the HSO, and that's a big reason why Animus don't have any control over B here, is because if you had an HSO, you're more often going to win those opening gunfights, and you're going to stop teams getting in towards B, and that's why Exclusive is so successful at it. And even, earlier on, why Animus could break into the site, because Exclusive also had a pretty weak setup over on B. It's just that Animus would actually solo chow those plays. So as we get further into the round specifically here, we can talk a little bit about how this kind of goes down. So that reposition comes through. Sour opens up with the first blood. The double chow from Sour and Shark is almost immediately punished. And now all of a sudden, you have B-site control. And this is, again, a pretty standard kind of setup here from Exclusive. If we go to the minimap, you're going to have, your 3 players in sight, and they can position themselves, towards the back of the site if they want to. They've just got to make sure that you keep this and these angled watch, because you're never getting flanked by the opposition. Of course, the one thing that Exclusive also kind of have in their back pocket is that they always have a player like Neil trying to play off angle, either keeping an eye on the middle of the map or making that all-important wrap through towards the back line. And it is going to be the latter thing that once again kind of befalls Animus here in this situation. So if we show you guys how the rest of the round plays out, the bomb will go down. Neil picks up Gefila. And, well, now if you're Animus, you are at the very least conscious that this could possibly happen, but it is that exact same wrap happening once again from Neil in a 2 versus 4. Neil manages to walk straight through. I believe at this point he has seen Narc. Veer also tries to push through, and it's just so simple. Exclusive, they are very, very good at playing off angles on the site. But I'll keep on saying it. It is the pretty poor defensive setup, from Animus that really does befall them time and time again here on this map. Okay, so final round then for Exclusive. This is the first time this entire defense that Animus changed their setup, and it is an interesting change in defensive setup. So again, I'm going to remind you here as we kind of take a pause that their defensive setup has so far been, again, a pretty standard affair. And it's generally speaking been Sour and Shark that have been kind of loitering about the B site, whether they're kind of around here or inside the bar, maybe they're at the back of the site. Either way, the setup has been pretty standard so far. This time, though, they've changed things up a little bit. So Shark is number 5 on the minimap. He's now playing around A. You've got a double setup pushing through A long, trying to get aggressive here on the defense. And this time, you've got Says hanging about in the backside of B. This is the setup more or less that we wanted to see from Animus, at least in regards to Says positioning. Now, I guess a small little issue here at the start of this round, though, with this kind of setup is that Says has to do a couple of things due to the fact that, this A setup is so predicated on players pushing all the way through towards long. Like, you're trying to get a player like Gefila to here. Spoiler alert, that's what they do. But it's not like, you've got a player sat down watching the middle of the map through ramp. Says basically has to cover both this angle and this angle, and has to keep on kind of back and forth between the two. That's like Says' entire purpose in this round, and that will be a problem as we get later into the round. But regardless, small change in setup here for Animus off the start of this round, and we'll show you kind of how the round plays out. So again, you're looking to push all the way up towards A. That is exactly what happens. And early on in this round, Exclusive just trying to get a feel for what Animus are doing. Now, It is a position where Gafilla has right now where he can definitely catch a player off guard. Unfortunately, he just doesn't. Exclusive, they perfectly predict it, they perfectly peek it, and Gafilla gets shut down in the round. Now this is where, as we see that B push start to come together for Exclusive, Animus' setup starts to feel a little bit like porcelain. It is very easy to break. Again, I'll remind you guys that Says has to consistently make this reposition, back and forth from this position to this position, and even more so now, given the fact that, Shark and Narcs, they have to keep an eye on A, because right now, these guys have no information other than, hey, these guys pushing towards A and Gafilla died. They don't really have any information to work with in this round. So Says has to keep on going from position to position, and in doing so, on the rewrap through the middle of the map, he gets sniped off by Neil. Now, the rest of this round is pretty interesting because Sawo has already repositioned through the middle of the map. And Sawo almost saves this round here with this push through. Neil picks off another one over towards A, but Sawo gets a couple of kills. And that in itself is a very good thing for Sawo to do. He almost evens the odds entirely for the rest of his team. The problem is, Exclusive aren't a stupid team. All they need is information that, hey, listen, we've already killed Shark in this round. Shark is dead. We already know that. And we now know that Sawo's in the middle of the map. We've killed Says towards the back of the map. So it doesn't take a genius for Exclusive to think, okay, well, now we know Sawo is here. He's probably not going to get here real quick. We can make that wrap through to what should be a completely free bomb site. And we know that because Sawo has revealed his position. We've already killed Shark in the round as well as Says. So they're almost immediately here, if I just get rid of that small dot I accidentally just created on the screen, they almost immediately get through towards B. Now, Narcs at the very least does take Neil out of this play and makes things a little bit interesting here on the retake. But as we move in towards the round now, we go down to a 2 versus 2 between the last couple of players. Good opportunity for Animus to salvage the round. And they just got to wait for each other in the situation. Now, the patience is actually pretty good from both players here. They wait to get together on the push through. The issue actually, if anything, is just a small bit of util thrown here. So Sawo is going to throw a smoke down towards the back. That actually obfuscates things for both players. It makes things more difficult for to kill Champion Spy in this situation. And they make the best of that. They just make total mess of it. Narcs pushes towards the backline, slow push, and then of course Sawo is isolated for the 1 versus 2. He ain't winning that in a month of Sundays, and it's a very easy repeat coming through from Exclusive there at the 2 versus 2. So Exclusive there towards the end, albeit Animus probably played that final round very, very well. Sawo tried to salvage it through the middle of the map. Just a really good read of positioning with the information that you have on the map, and I love how proactive Exclusive thought were in that final round. So overall then, the search and destroy in Europe isn't actually that bad, but I think it could do with some serious improvement. If we look at why Exclusive were able to beat Animus in that situation, it was really down to a pretty poor DB defense from Animus, and that is, to be fair, a characteristic that both Exclusive and Animus in that Coastal Search and Destroy held, in that their B defense could have looked a lot better, especially when you consider as powerful weapons such as the HSO or the Tundra in play for both teams. I mentioned there towards the end of that Search and Destroy how Chinese teams seem to play this a pretty significantly better way, especially around that B site. And I'll be fair in saying that I think this is something that if European teams put the time, if Exclusive put the time into VODing some teams from CDM, really anybody who's performing in CDM on Coastal Search and Destroy, it wouldn't take that much to adapt those kind of strategies into their gameplay. But as for why Exclusive were able to beat Animus, as I said, that B setup for Animus, it felt like it was a little bit weaker and there wasn't anywhere near enough control of the entry point. Exclusive read that a little bit faster, and I also think that Exclusive were consistently sending flanking players through, like Veer and Neil were constantly playing in off positions, off angles, that I don't think Animus really read even until maybe the final round. However, I will say the one thing about European Call of Duty Mobile on the whole in Search and Destroy is that sometimes it feels like players can play a little bit individually and can over-challenge more often than maybe you'll see players do so in the East. And again, this is something that is fixable. So on the whole, European S&D, not that bad, but definitely could do with improvement, and it's nothing that VOD couldn't necessarily fix. Alright, that's going to do it for this analysis of Exclusive versus Animus on Coastal Search and Destroy. Next up, we're going to be taking a look at Bear versus Paradox over in the African region to see how the newcomers to the Call of Duty Mobile World Championships are going to perform on the global stage in November. If you like what you see in this video, make sure you like this video to let more people be able to see it, and subscribe to the channel for all things Call of Duty Mobile Esports. Thanks so much for watching again, guys, and I'll catch you in the next video.